Okay, so just to follow on from the previous worksheet on roofing, the first one we worked on was this one here, so it was just practicing doing the slates. We mentioned a number of times that they're quite tricky to do and to get right, and they can get messy and be frustrating, so just a little practice run on doing the slates themselves. To follow on from that, we are now going to do a roofing worksheet whereby we are going to build up the battens, fascia, soffit and the slates. So the previous worksheet, the battens, fascia, soffit, tilting fillet were all given to us. All we had to do were the slates. In this case, we are now going to practice drawing in all of those parts ourselves, so batten, fascia, soffit and so on. Again, it's important to point out that first worksheet was a scale of 1 to 5, and the reason for that was just so it was nice and big when we were drawing in the slates. We are now going back to a scale of 1 to 10, so you'll notice the drawing is a little bit smaller, and that's kind of the more common scale that we've been working with. So we're going to go back to scale of 1 to 10. Alright. Equipment we're going to be using as usual: P-square, 2H pencil, the H pencil for your dark work, 60-30 set square, 45-degree set square, rubber, and your pens, red, black, green and blue. Okay, now I'm going to actually just show you the solution to this question as well, as to what it should look like. So that's the starting point. This is how it should look like when it's finished. So basically we're adding in battens, tilting fillet, fascia, soffit and slates. So we're going to be practicing doing slates again, which will be good before we actually draw the full detail. Okay, so just to read the question there: slated roof, eaves detail. In the detail below, complete the following components: tilting fillet, soffit and fascia, roofing felt, the battens, and 3 to 4 courses of slates. So 3 to 4 courses of slate. A course of slate is basically a slate working its way up. So 1, 2, 3 or 4 courses of slates. So we'll start off by working on the soffit and fascia. When you actually start drawing these details from scratch, you'll build up the wall and the rafter and the joist yourself, and you'll get to this point here where you've got a line for your fascia and a line there for your soffit. So I'm going to start drawing in the soffit and fascia. So I'll zoom in there into position so it's nice and clear to see. So when drawing my fascia, we're going to do everything lightly. First of all, I will extend that line up lightly, as I said. A fascia is 25 millimeters thick, so I'm going to go 2.5 millimeters out there, and I'm going to extend that out lightly. Alright, so just randomly there. The fascia generally runs a little bit below the rafter, so I'll extend that down. Make your own judgment on that. So I'm going to go maybe 70 or so millimeters below there. I'll just draw in the fascia, the bottom of the fascia, into position there. I will draw in the soffit. Then the soffit is usually about 12 millimeters thick, so I'll draw in the soffit into position there. Okay, so soffit and fascia. The top of the fascia we haven't got yet. The top of the fascia runs a little bit past the rafter, and that will be how high up it goes will be judged on the position of the battens. So this roof is at 30 degrees, so I'm using my 30-degree set square in this position. Alright, this particular question, the roof we have is 30 degrees, and we're going to start drawing in the position of some battens. A batten is 50 millimeters by 25 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the line out perpendicular to the rafter lightly, and I'm going to measure 25 millimeters, so that would be 2.5, and I'm going to draw that line lightly up along there. Okay, so I might just zoom out on that and explain that again. So this roof is at 30 degrees, so by putting my set square like this, I'm going out perpendicular. I measure 25 millimeters there, then I go off with a light line up along the rafter. That light line there will just indicate for me the top of the battens as I work my way up along there. Okay, now to avoid confusion, I'm going to rub out that line now because it's going to get in the way of some of my battens. we have that there now. To find the top of the fascia, what we need now, I'm actually going to extend that line down along to here, and where that hits the outside of the fascia, that will give us the top. Very, very important that we get that position correct there. I can now roll about all of this work here. So basically, just to reiterate that, where this light line extended, where it hits the top, or the opposite side of the fascia, that gives us the top position. Alright, now, in this area of the wood, we have a small little, of the drawing, we have a small little piece of wood here, which kind of just covers this little area from the top of the fascia down to the rafter. It's called a tilting fillet. Tilting fillet can now be drawn into position. You won't overthink the size of the tilting fillet, just a pretty random angle that is now fixed into place there. Okay, so now we can start drawing in the batten. So we have our tilting fillet done. We have our tilting fillet done, our soffit and our fascia. Tilting fillet, soffit, fascia. And just to do that again, tilting fillet, soffit and fascia. Okay, so we're now going to start drawing into positions and battens. Now, measurements on these battens, page 81 of your Essential Construction Studies journal. There's some really good measurements in getting those positions. Just to go back on the previous worksheet very quickly, we all now know that there's 3 layers of slates over the front. So we have roughly a third of a slate, roughly half a slate, and then a full slate. And as you work your way back up along, we're putting full slates in from there on. Each of these battens all the way up the roof are 250 millimeters apart, but the first ones, there's a slight difference. The first batten, we go out past the fascia and we go back 250, and then we put a second one batten out there at 350. So there's good measurements there on page 81 to get it. So what I'm going to do is, once again, extend that line down past the fascia. As we know, our slates need to go past it. I'm going to pick a point 50 millimeters out past the fascia. So there, 50 millimeters, and we scale it down as 5. So I've basically gone 5 millimeters there, and I am now going to measure up 250 millimeters along that line, and that dot there will bring me to the center of my first batten. A batten, as we know, is 50 millimeters, so I'm going to just go 2.5 millimeters to the left and 2.5 millimeters to the right. And that will give us our first batten. As we know, we are looking at the end of a piece of wood, so to represent the end of a piece of wood, we join the diagonals. Just to reiterate what we've done there, from a point here, we've measured back along there 250 millimeters, and then we've gone 25 that way and 25 that way. And that gives us the first batten. 0 is back on this point here, and we're now going to measure 350 millimeters, so that's 35, and do the same thing. 2.5, 2.5. I like to just set up 5 millimeter spacing there, centered over that first dot. And there's the second batten. Okay, and from there on, every other batten all the way up the roof are 250 millimeters apart. So from the center of this batten to the center of that batten is 250. Now, a handy way of marking those from there on up, you could just go, if it's from the center to center 250, it'll be the same from front to front. So I'm going to set my 0 on there and mark up 250 and continue to mark those battens on. So 0 is set up here. I'm going to mark 250. and then extend on 50, and draw the batten in. I'll draw another 1 or 2 battens, so from here, zeros on the front of the batten, 250, and then add on 50. That's the next batten. And then we will add on another 250 and add on 50 from there. And you could work up all the way to the roof. Generally in an exam question they might ask for you just to do 3 or 4 courses of slates. Now this guideline that I have here can now be rubbed out. That was, as we said, just a guideline. So as always, everything is done lightly. And that's gone. Before we go on to the slates, we can now just draw on the felt. So black pen, just a nice clean dark line, nice and visible. The felt runs down along the rafter underneath those battens. The battens are helping to hold the felt down. The felt will run along the top of the tilting fillet and we'll just run out a small bit there. And again, the tilting fillet allows to guide the waterway over the fascia. At that point of the drawing, we are pretty much where we were when we were given this worksheet. We have the battens, everything in place. Now it's just a matter of drawing the slates. So we all know the pitfalls when it comes to drawing the slates, the problems that can arise, how tricky it can be. So it's just practice. It's all about practice with this worksheet. Battens are all in position, we can now draw those in. The first slate, all the slates start from the center of the battens, so even if you want to mark, just estimate, don't measure. If you want to measure, you can. Just pick a position in the center of each batten. The first slate is 250 millimeters, so roughly a third, a little over a third. And that's going to rest on the fascia, and it's going to go 50 millimeters out past the fascia itself. As we always say with the slates are quite a thin object, at best a thick line with those. The danger is this ends up looking like a bit of a smudge, but we'll have to be careful with that. So from the center of the batten, 250 millimeters there. The second one, center of the next batten, 350 millimeters. And as we always say, the tiniest of gap between those, for the sake of drawing, is what you're aiming to get. So your second slate is resting down over there. So roughly a third of a slate, roughly half a slate, and your first full slate is nailed to this batten here. So 600 millimeter slate. I put 60 on there, and I'll draw my line slightly out over there. And as I said, just a thick line there. You can see there it's becoming a bit of a smudge, but nice and tidy, that's acceptable. The danger is it can become quite messy here and become unclear there. And from there on, for every other batten, you're just going to go 600 all the way. So I'm going to go to the next batten, center of it, and by putting a full slate on all the way up, you've got a nice overlap over this slate and that slate there. So there's actually 3 slates overlapping there, and we've got 2 in that position. You go to the next one, 600, and there are your slates done. Again, if you want to add more battens and more slates all the way up, you can do that as well. But that is just an exercise in practicing drawing the battens, drawing the tilting fillet, the fascia and the soffit. At that point, if you can get a good understanding of getting all those done, you're ready to start an actual full drawing detail. The last thing we want to do then is just add some labels to this. We'll do it on this worksheet just to help us get used to the sizes. So what we have here is a 12mm soffit. 12mm soffit. We've got a 25mm fascia. We have our roofing felt to that black pen line. We have a 50 by 12mm batten, so try and remember those sizes. 50 by 25mm batten. We have our tilting fillet, no particular size on the tilting fillet. And we have our, I'll just label up here, 600mm slate. So all those sizes will be needed and will need to be understood. And that is that worksheet complete. As I said, if you can get yourself an understanding that worksheet, you're ready then to go on and do a full eaves detail drawing.